Good morning, and welcome to the first day of the 2025 AGTA, American Gem Trade Association's Inspire Seminar Series, sponsored by the AGS, the American Gem Society. Harry Winston and his most notable pursuits. Harry Winston started pursuing the perfect jewel at just 12 years old. His quest across the globe was to acquire some of the largest rough and cut diamonds, and the most prized estates ever assembled is legendary. Harry Winston and his jewels continue to captivate the world even decades after his death, and this is their story. On stage with us this hour is noted Harry Winston historian Angela Hedges. Angela Hedges is a graduate gemologist who joined Harry Winston in 2006, where over the next 16 years, pioneered digitizing the House of Winston's historical archives and curated their estate jewelry museum collection. Wow, what a job. Now through her own AMH luxury consulting firm in New York City, she offers her expertise to privates, the trade, and auction houses. Please join me in welcoming Angela Hedges.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. Good morning, Tucson. As a New Yorker in the middle of winter, it feels so good to say that. Good morning, and thank you for coming to Harry Winston and his most notable pursuits. You've got to have guts, and you've got to have your wits in this business. Who said that? This little guy right here. In the office, we used to call him Baby Harry. Harry was born March 1st, 1896 in New York City. He was a first-generation American born to Ukrainian immigrant parents, Jacob and Jenny. Harry had 3 siblings, older brothers Charles and Stanley, and a sister Dora. By the age of 12, he was working for his father in their family jewelry shop on the west side of New York City. It was then that he revealed himself as an innate sense of gems when he spotted an emerald in a tray of junk jewelry at a pawn shop. His father, Jacob, thought the stone was junk and wanted to cut it. Harry begged him not to. Harry bought that stone for 25 cents and sold it 2 days later for $800. Ever since I was quite young, jewels have fascinated me. I think I must have been born with some knowledge of them. By the time Harry was 15, he had left school and worked for his father full-time. Now, about that time, his father was asthmatic with health issues, and he wanted the clean air of this West Coast, so they moved to LA and opened a shop on Figueroa Street. Harry's mother would not make the trip. She died in New York. Around 18, Harry grew tired of California. He longed for the hustle and bustle of New York City. So he took his savings of just $2,000 and he moved back. And he would eventually rent a small office at 535 Fifth Avenue. This is one of the earliest photos that we have of Harry in his new office. By 1920, he was ready to open his first shop, the Premier Diamond Company. As the American economy recovered from World War I, families were selling their gems and jewelry in exchange for cash. They went to Harry. He removed the high-quality gems from their old-fashioned mountings, and he redesigned them into contemporary settings. Estate jewelry was at the core of Harry's business. He now had so much business that he had to hire help. Unfortunately, Harry came into the office one day after that new hire, only to find that he had been entirely wiped out. Jewels, cash, all of it was gone. Now, Harry needed to rely more so on the banks, and he learned that his youthful appearance was actually an obstacle. He was very resourceful. The bankers called him a boy, so what did he do? He hired an older, more distinguished gentleman to take meetings on his behalf. That man's name also just so happened to be Harry, a Harry Gabarsky. During this time, as you can see on this slide, Harry took further steps to control his brand's narrative, changing his last name from Weinstein to Winston. In 1925 came Harry's first break, the estate of Rebecca Darlington Stoddard. Rebecca was the wife of Major Lewis Stoddard, who was the chairman of the U.S. Polo Association at the time. Harry had no credit. He was armed with just an introductory letter from his bank, and he offered $1 million for the estate. He said that if they let him buy the estate for $1 million, he promised them that in 6 months he would actually secure $1.2 million. Within 6 months, he actually sold the collection for $1.25 million. Now, if you look at this slide closely, what I have always loved about it is that you have the Stoddard estate in the newspaper, and on the bottom right-hand corner, you have a $25 reward for a lost Pomeranian whose name was Pito. Just 1 year later, in 1926, Harry acquired the collection of Arabella Huntington. She was the widow of railroad tycoon Collis P. Huntington. Now, while examining this particular estate, Harry wanted to see a bracelet in better light. The executor of the estate told him that he would have to pay more to do so. Harry was annoyed, of course, but said, okay, fine. At the time of Arabella's death, her collection was one of the most extravagant collections ever appraised. It was famous for a luxurious strand of pearls, which Harry pointed out was nearly as tall as him at 60 inches. Unfortunately, she never got to enjoy these pearls because she went blind before the strand was complete. So, as you can see here on the right, Harry would make several necklaces out of this one strand, and women all over the world would enjoy them. While Harry negotiated this purchase for $1.2 million, today it would equate to $15 million. Harry continued to buy and sell estates, remaking jewelry into more contemporary styles. And then in 1930, an estate with more than 1,000 carats of gems came into Harry's hands. It was the Elias Lucky Baldwin estate. Now, Lucky Baldwin was a livery stable owner and mining tycoon, turned mining tycoon when he moved to San Francisco during the California Gold Rush. The star of this particular collection was a very rare 25-carat ruby. What makes this gem unique, Harry said, is that while there are many famous diamonds, this is the only known famous ruby. Such a stone enters the market about once a century. Did Harry know where this ruby came from? No. But his innate sense of quality told him that this ruby was significant. Once again, Harry's intuition resulted in profit, and his pursuit of the perfect jewel continued. Just 2 years later, in 1932, Harry was ready to put his name on the door. He closed the Premier Diamond Company, and he opened Harry Winston Incorporated. Jewels are more than my love and my life, Harry would say. They're an insatiable obsession. And so was Edna. On a business trip to Atlantic City in the late 1920s, Harry found himself seated next to a beautiful woman whose name was Edna Fleischman. She was traveling with her father to rest from a tonsillectomy. He was instantly enamored with her, and they courted for quite some time. But Harry could not pry himself from his business, and she became engaged to another man. She said, "See ya." After a year of not speaking, he called her from Palm Beach with a plea, "Edna, marry me instead." She said, "If you come up and get me right now up in New York City, I will." And they did. He went up to New York City. They eloped on February 10th, 1933. As you can see here, she was born to wear Harry's jewels. She was even quoted in the newspaper as his best customer. They were inseparable. They were now pursuing the perfect jewel together. "Oh, Harry, always complaining about selling your babies." She knew him so well. He hated to let his gems go. But he put her to work. As you can see, she was quite influential in Winston advertising. And here. But nothing got past Harry without his approval. They worked very closely together, as you can see in this slide. Harry even put his house cat to work. So this is Cashmere, Harry's cat. put to work in the 1940s in this advertisement. If I could, I would attach diamonds directly onto a woman's skin. Oh, Harry. So it was during this time in the 1940s that Harry revolutionized the way diamonds were set. What he did is actually attach diamonds to a woman's skin with Winston cluster. Harry's inspiration for cluster would come from a snow-frosted wreath on his own front door at the family home in Scarsdale. He worked with his head designer at the time, Nevden Kamroyan, who you can see here on the right. What they did is they set diamonds with minimal platinum to achieve that look, in fact, as if they were attached to a woman's skin. Cue in Betsy Bloomingdale. Here's Betsy with earrings, cluster earrings from 1958 with 41.20 carats of diamonds. Her necklace from 1962, 145.73 carats of diamonds. Charlize Theron at the Oscars in 2016, wearing Harry Winston cluster earrings. From Betsy to Charlize, Winston cluster is timeless, wearable art. Back to our pursuit. So, in 1934, a rough diamond weighing 726 carats was discovered in South Africa and was at the time the fourth largest diamond ever found. It was unearthed by Jacobus Jonker, who had been mining unsuccessfully for 18 years. Harry bought this rough for about $700,000, and he had it shipped from London via the regular mail to the US for just 64 cents. No American had ever done such a thing in the diamond business. Early on, Harry understood the importance of marketing, so the Yonkers' first stop in the US was a photo shoot with little Shirley Temple that you can see here. When it came to cutting the Yonker, Harry chose master cutter Lazar Kaplan, who studied this rough for 14 months. Harry actually wanted the process to be recorded, and Lloyd's of London said, "We are not covering you. Do what you're going to do, but we're not insuring you." And he said, "Okay, fine." Now, I'm going to play you this video. It's 16 seconds, so it goes by really quick. There's no sound. What you're going to see here is Lazar Kaplan sitting with his son Leo to the left. You will see the first cleave of the diamond at the end of the 16-second video. You're going to see the first 3 cleaved sections. So here goes. So every time I show this video and you see that first cleave, there's always a little something, there's always a little sound from the audience, and I heard that here, right? Because we all know if you cut a diamond it's a rough diamond in the wrong direction, it could literally shatter. And so even though I've probably watched this video like 1,027 times, it still gives me a little jolt when I see that first cleave as well. The largest diamond cut from this rough weighed 142.90 carats, but Harry was like, let me recut it a little bit. And its ultimate weight was 125.35 carats. Harry loved this baby so much that he waited 14 years to sell it. Just recently, so the Jonker one had been, it just resurfaced a year and a half ago. It had basically been in hiding for decades, since the 70s, and it was on display at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles. In recent years, the Jonker 5, weighing 25.27 carats, sold at auction for just over 3 million francs. Now remember, 300 million francs versus Harry bought the entire rough for just over 700,000. Of the 726 carats, 300 carats went to diamond dust. Still in search after 12 perfect jewels were cut from the Jonker? You bet. In 1938, another large rough was discovered in the San Antonio River in Brazil. A diamond weighing 726.60 carats, almost identical to the weight of the Jonker, was discovered. At the time, it was the sixth largest piece of rough ever discovered, and it was named in honor of the Brazilian president at that time. Harry read about the discovery in a small newspaper article, and he immediately went to Brazil, only to find out that it had been sent to Amsterdam at the request of another dealer. What did Harry do? He took a faster ship, and he got there first, and he closed the deal. He shipped the Vargas from Amsterdam to New York at 726 carats for 70 cents. If you can't trust the United States mails, Harry said, who can you trust? The Vargas was cut into the 29 stones that you see here. The largest stones were set into a bracelet, as you can see in this advertisement from 1947 on the left. It was sold to an Indian Maharaja, and a few years later in 1952, the Maharaja said, Harry, can you reset this into a necklace? Of course, Harry did. The total carat weight was just over 176 carats in the necklace. Now, Harry loved the French Riviera. It was he and Edna's favorite place to vacation. And because he was there so much, he consigned goods to the Riviera shops. It was in the French Riviera that Harry learned of the onset of World War II. Lloyd's of London canceled his insurance policy immediately. So, Harry and Edna sprung into action. They got the goods back on the ship to the U.S., and what they did is Harry had special pockets sewn into his suit. The heels of his soles of his shoes had little hiding places for the jewels, and it is said that Edna wore all of her little wiglets to hide the jewels in her hair as well. Back in the U.S., once again, Harry's business didn't just survive another war, he benefited from families selling off their jewels to recover. He was so busy that even his barber came to him. All right, let's take stock on where Harry was in the industry at this time. He had purchased the Yonker, which was the fourth largest rough ever acquired, the Vargas, which was the sixth. Harry was just a man. He wasn't a large firm. He wasn't De Beers. Nobody was doing anything else like this. So, with business booming, he inched his way up Fifth Avenue again, and by 1942, he needed a lot more space. He moved into 7 East 51st Street, formerly the townhouse of the daughter of Senator William Clark, who was a Montana mining magnate. Directly adjacent to St. Patrick's Cathedral, it was really an ideal location, which not housed only his salon and his workshop, but he moved his wife and 2 young sons upstairs. So remember, in the early 30s, Edna had left him because he was too busy. And so years later, what does he do? He just moves everybody into the office. So the family lived upstairs. Shortly after Harry's move to 7 East 51st, he hired John Rawlings, who took the brand's identity to new heights with very provocative advertising. These advertisements are beautiful, but does this look like 1942 to you? It was. Harry continued promoting his brand as an entire diamond industry under one roof, because it was, and he continued to pair it with racy and contemporary glamour that you can see here. Then, a D-colored briolette weighing 90.38 carats made its way to Harry. Originally cut in the 1900s in France, it was sold by a retailer in Paris. Harry bought it from an American philanthropist widow and sold it to a Maharaja, Indian Maharaja, the following year. Upon that Maharaja's death in 1956, Harry repurchased the stone and sold it to Dorothy Killam, an American-born Canadian philanthropist herself. Upon her death in 1967, Harry purchased her entire collection and sold the briolette to an important family in Europe in 1971. Harry bought and sold the briolette 3 times, and so this stone is an excellent example of, yes, Harry did love his babies, and he didn't want to let them go. He never forgot about them, and each time he would buy and sell, it furthered the stone's provenance. Some of you might have seen that about a year and a half ago, the briolette was sold at auction. It sold for 6.3 million Swiss francs at Christie's. 6.3 million today. Harry bought it for 149,000. The 1940s remained very strong for Harry. He also bought the Idol's Eye, a 70.20 carat flawless diamond discovered in India's Golconda region in the early 17th century. It appeared at auction in 1909 in Paris, and then it changed hands several times before Harry acquired it in 1946. In this deal, Harry made a secret trip to London and back before anyone even knew that the diamond was for sale. So by 1946, that's how connected Harry was. In 1946, he would also purchase the Golconda indoor pairs, owned by the Maharaja of Indore. Both weighing just under 50 carats each, Harry would buy back and sell these 3 times over the next 2 decades. As a set of earrings, these diamonds sold in 1987 at Christie's and sold for $2.7 million. They're now currently owned, as you can see here, by Muawat in Dubai. Harry knew diamonds, we know that, right? But let's not forget that his first buy was an emerald. He also acquired the rarest colored stones in the world, claiming his business as rare jewels of the world. Named for Eva Stotesbury, who was married to Edward T. Stotesbury, a banker in Philadelphia and New York, the Stotesbury emerald is 34.40 carats, Colombian origin, has this really incredible hexagonal cut. It was sold at Sotheby's in recent years for just under $1 million. Harry also owned the Catherine the Great sapphire. It now weighs 311 carats. It's of Ceylon origin. He acquired it in 1948. He held on to it for 14 years. The Star of Africa, a 54.95 carats Mozambique ruby, recently sold at auction for $2.7 million. This natural pearl was the size of an egg at 39 grams. What did the house do with it? They set it into a rose quartz Buddha belly, of course. Back to diamonds. It was 1947, when Harry was 51, that Cosmopolitan magazine crowned him as King of Diamonds. Take that, Tiffany. 2 years later, Harry carried that crown to the next level when he acquired the Evelyn Walsh McLean estate. It hit the market in 1949. Evelyn was a Washington, D.C. socialite and mining heiress who died of pneumonia in 1947. The highlight of this estate, as we all know, is the Hope diamond, weighing 45.52 carats. Its color is fancy deep grayish blue, mounted in a Cartier necklace. It is said that Evelyn was known for her lavish parties, and she even let her Great Dane, whose name was Mike, wear the Hope diamond at these parties. With well over 50 items at this estate, jewelry and stones, the newspapers went wild. Mailman brings ice, the headlines read. Harry would acquire this estate at the time for around $2 million. Also in this estate, the Star of the East diamond, which Evelyn wore frequently with the Hope, D-color, 94.80 carats of perfection. King Farouk had to have it. In 1951, Harry gave the stone to Farouk on memo. And when he was overthrown the following year, it still had not been paid for. So it took many years of litigation, and eventually Harry would acquire a key to a safe deposit box in Switzerland to retrieve it. Harry would buy and sell this diamond multiple times as well. The Duchess of Windsor also took quite an interest in this estate. My friends tell me you have such wonderful things, Harry. And with that, she bought a 31.36 carat cushion diamond from the McLean estate. Through the years, she would buy a 12 carat emerald cut diamond brooch, a 7 carat ruby ring, These twin pear-shaped yellow diamond earrings that you can see weighing a total of 92 carats, and this 47.14 carat fancy intense yellow heart-shaped diamond. Harry's jewels have always been coveted by royalty. You have on the left Queen Elizabeth wearing a Harry Winston necklace presented to her by King Khalid of Saudi Arabia during a state visit in 1979. On the right is a necklace that was also gifted to the Queen in 1967 by King Faisal, and both of these necklaces were prominently featured as spreads in the Queen's diamonds. In 1968, the former queen and last empress of Iran, Farah Pahlavi, commissioned Harry Winston to create the stunning turquoise and diamond tiara. With over 135 carats of turquoises and just under 50 carats of diamonds, she would require earrings to match, of course. Speaking of royalty, inspired by the royal crown jewels, Harry wanted his fellow Americans to have the same access and cultural appreciation for historical jewels. So he did more than just advertise his jewelry. He sent his collection around the U.S. to teach local communities about diamonds and precious gems. "I want the public to know more about precious gems," he said. And in his hand here, he holds the Star of the East, the Hope, the Idol's Eye, the Indoor Pear is a 62-carat emerald, the Yonker, the 311-carat Catherine the Great sapphire, and a 14-carat ruby. When I look at this photo, I always think, nobody's hands are bigger than Harry's. It was with that idea of sharing his knowledge and expertise with the public that the Court of Jewels was created. This public exhibition featured, of course, the Hope Diamond, the Yonker, the Indoor Pears, and many other historical items. Harry also made it his mission to use these exhibitions as a platform to aid local charities, such as the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which is what we know today as the March of Dimes. The Court of Jewels would be the root of Harry's philanthropic endeavors. It was important for him to give back, and the brand continues to do so today. My God, what we go through to adorn women, what we have to do in this business, the talking I have to do, I'm constantly hoarse from all the talking. Harry was so dramatic. Those were his words. Clearly, the Court of Jewels had taken a toll on Harry, and by 1953, it had been disabled due to rising costs. But the 50s remained abundant for Harry, and even Marilyn sang to him. We all know this, right? "Talk to me, Harry Winston. Tell me all about it." The ladies were absolutely wild for Harry. So every time I look at this photo, I imagine that it was Harry who actually coined the phrase, "go big or go home." Speaking of big, discovered in South Africa in 1952 and purchased by Harry a year later in 1953, this 154.5 carat diamond was so special to Harry that he named it after himself. "I'm going to keep this one quiet," he said. "I may play with it for a while, or I may just look at it. This stone is like a great painting, one of the finest in the world. This stone will go down in history." He cut it to a 62.05D flawless pear shape, and it was sold in 1959 to the King of Saudi Arabia, and he returned it a year later. So what did Harry do? He recut it again to 6180, and he matched it to a 58.60 carat pear-shaped diamond, and then sold them as earrings in 1963. Those earrings were last seen on the market in 1981 and sold for $7.3 million. As the 50s wrapped up, in 1958, Harry finally decided to let go of yet another baby, the Hope Diamond. He mailed it via the United States Postal Service for $145.29, and he donated it to the Smithsonian for the American public. If you look at this photo, you will see up in the kind of upper right-hand corner, you'll see $2.44. That was just the actual postage to mail it. The additional $142.85 was $2 million in insurance. So it really just cost $2.44 to mail the Hope Diamond. So upon arrival at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., it was his wife, Edna, that presented the Hope. So why was it Edna and not Harry? Well, a clause in Harry's insurance policy indicated that he needed to stay away from the cameras or they would cancel his insurance policy. He was quite the high client risk, and everyone knew that this guy carried diamonds around in his pockets all the time because he told people that he carried diamonds around in his pockets all the time. He was so careful until 1959, when he publicly bid on the Westminster tiara at Sotheby's in London. The press went bonkers to catch a shot of Harry. It was like a paparazzi frenzy. Although Harry appreciated the historical nature of the tiara, he unset the two large pear-shaped diamonds that were the arcots. He cut them into flawless and he set them separately into rings. Ultimately, the redesigned tiara would be sold to a client in Florida in 1976. Sorry, you can't hide, the newspaper headlines read. I just love that. And you can see the look on his face. He was not happy to be photographed. So, redesigning perfection, the pursuit continues. Although Harry had been doing business globally for 2 decades, it wasn't until the late 50s that he built flagships in Europe. It's in the blood, he said. I rejoice in this. I love diamonds. And so he opened Geneva in 1955, 1957 in Paris. It was Harry Winston, an American, who was the first in jewelry expansion to Europe. Harry knew to keep his friends close and his enemies closer. So he built and maintained a personal and professional relationship with Sir Ernest Oppenheimer, who, of course, as we all know, was the chairman of the board of director for De Beers Consolidated Mines at the time. Harry was obviously their biggest client at that time. In 1964, Harry acquired and donated a 253.70 carat rough yellow diamond in honor of Oppenheimer's memory to the Smithsonian. And you can see that Mr. Oppenheimer signed this photograph of he and Harry in 1957. Harry's donation of the Hope Diamond and the Oppenheimer Diamond were the first of just many. So like this 858 carat Colombian emerald from the Gachala Municipality of Colombia was donated to the Smithsonian in 1969. The 127.01 carat Portuguese diamond, which toured in Harry's Court of Jewels, was acquired by the Smithsonian in 1963. One of my favorites in the entire Harry Winston archives is this 32 carats black opal peacock brooch that was donated to the Smithsonian in 1977. Harry's donations to his fellow Americans inspired his clients, like Marjorie Merriweather Post. She was the heiress to the Post cereal empire, who bought the Napoleon diamond necklace from Harry, weighing just under 275 carats in 1962 for $1 million. The necklace, as we all know, was originally a gift for Napoleon's second wife, Marie Louise, for the birth of their son in 1811. Per Marjorie's instructions, the necklace was given to the Smithsonian upon her death in 1973. She would also donate a 30.62 carat fancy deep blue heart-shaped Harry Winston ring to the Smithsonian. At that time in 1973, it was valued at $282,000. If you haven't been there, in all there are 16 items at the Smithsonian, including this fabulous brass bust of Harry, so you should get there if you haven't. Continuing our pursuit. So Harry's business had once again outgrown another location. He purchased 718 Fifth Avenue, which was just 5 blocks from 7 East 51st, and he moved in on March 22nd, 1960. Those 5 blocks of New York City streets were completely shut down, by the local police, and this took place in the early morning hours. By 7 a.m., Harry had moved his entire collection 5 blocks up Fifth Avenue. At that time, it was the largest public relocation of jewels that the world had ever seen. And it all happened before my alarm clock even goes off. So the new location was bigger and better. He renovated the exterior with French architect Jacques Renault and the interior with the firm Mason Jansen, both of whom would work with Jackie Kennedy at the White House. But Harry did it first. 718 Fifth Avenue would later be cited as the best renovated building by the Fifth Avenue Association. 718 Fifth Avenue, however, was just not big enough. Manufacturing jewelry and cutting diamonds, which he was still doing at the time, under one roof was no longer feasible. He opened cutting and manufacturing locations in Chandler, Arizona, in Puerto Rico, and even Ireland. His facilities enriched these communities with new employment opportunities, bringing stability to those communities and those families. And in keeping with his roots, he even kept a little office in Los Angeles as well. At this time, Harry's business was really moving faster than ever, and so was Elizabeth Taylor on husband number 5. The Taylor Burton was cut by Harry Winston from a 241-carat piece of rough that was discovered in 1966 at the Premier Mine in South Africa. It was fashioned into this 69.42-carat pear-shaped D flawless. When the necklace was finished in 1967, Mrs. Paul Annenberg Ames purchased it. She was the founding member of the United Cerebral Palsy Association, and then 2 years later, it was up for sale at auction. The date after that auction, Richard Burton, who was the underbidder, purchased it privately from Cartier for Elizabeth Taylor, and that is how she acquired it. Still in pursuit, we have come to the Lesotho. The discovery of this stone in the country of Lesotho was by a female miner, and her name was Ernestine Ramaboa, and she carried that stone 110 miles to her capital to sell it. When I even just try and think about that 110-mile journey, how could she ever have thought that she would grace the cover of Life magazine? Harry was actually the third owner of this stone. It weighed 601.25 carats. It was about the size of an egg. It was cut into the 18 stones that you see here, and it resulted in 242.50 carats of polished diamonds. He even invited Mr. and Mrs. Ramaboa to New York for the delivery of the stone. He gave them a tour of the city, and he even helped their daughter get medical care. Harry decided that the stone would be cut live on television, live on local broadcast television. Like television stations like NBC were airing this live. So I'm about to play another video here. This video is a little longer at like 43 seconds. But what you're going to see is the cutter, Pastor Colin Jr., making the first cleave of the stone. This happened in the flagship at 718 Fifth Avenue. It's going to pan over to all of the paparazzi, the press that were in the salon. But it starts out with this really beautiful clip from the community from South Africa. So no sound on this either. Here we go. Slice a sparkler. Mm-hmm. They did this live on television. Okay, they did it. So that was the video of the Lesotho cut live on television. The largest stone cut from this rough was 71.73 carats. It was an emerald cut. It continued to call the attention to Harry. Vogue showcased it in 1969. And what might not be so well known about this diamond is it wasn't colorless. You know, the Harry Winston today only sells colorless diamond of the finest clarity. This diamond is actually certified as N, very light brown. It is internally flawless, of course, but there's a lot of color in this stone, which you can see on the screen here. The Lesotho also brought the attention of Aristotle Onassis, a Greek shipping tycoon, as we know, who bought the third largest stone from that rough, a 40.42 carat marquise, and presented it to Jackie Kennedy as an engagement ring. When part of her estate sold in 1996, this diamond sold for $2.6 million at that time. The largest rough that Harry would ever hold in his hands weighed 970 carats, and it was discovered on Valentine's Day in 1972, the Star of Sierra Leone that you can see here on the left. Now, the largest polished stone from this rough was 143.20 carats. If you look at this advertisement, directly to the left of the rough is that large stone, 143.20 carats. But it wasn't perfect. Okay, so think 143.20 carats, it's not perfect. What did he do? After several weeks of deliberation, he ordered it to be recut into one large stone, which was 32.53 carats as an emerald cut, and then to 5 smaller marquise-shaped diamonds and 1 pear-shaped diamond that would ultimately result in the Star of Sierra Leone brooch. The diamond weight of that brooch is 28.85 carats. Of course, when it came up for sale at auction, I went there immediately. So that photograph that you're seeing, that's the brooch in my hand. It sold for $1.2 million at Sotheby's. It's currently in the UK and for sale if anybody's interested. All right, we are now coming to a close with what would be the last 2 diamonds Harry would ever acquire in his lifetime. Harry died in 1978, and in those last few years, he would pay tribute to his country as he was a proud American. A South African rough weighing 204 carats, purchased by him in 1975 and cut into a 75.52 carat deflawless pear-shaped the following year. In honor of the American bicentennial, he named it the Star of Independence, and he cut it into the necklace that you see here. It obviously made its way to Harry Winston advertising that you can see on the right. Within weeks of completion, this 75.52 carat pear shape with a necklace sold for just over $4 million. And finally, in 1976, Harry purchased a 342 carat piece of rough from South Africa. He had this rough cut into 2 D-color pear shapes. The largest was this 89.23 carat pear shaped, and he named it the Washington, after America's first president. At that time, it sold for $3.92 million, and in 2014, it sold for just over $11 million at auction. Harry understood the importance of marketing, and he always created these incredible advertisements that you have seen throughout the presentation for his most notable pursuits. It is estimated that one third of the world's most famous diamonds and gems passed through Harry's hands. The crown jewels would be his only rival ever. And yet, I suppose that's what I have been seeking all these years. A jewel more perfect than the most perfect jewel in the world. And I thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Questions? No questions? Yes,
Hi,
Madam
Lisa.
Member.
Hi, Angela. So, as a corollary to your discussion of the stones, the design and the way they were set and the evolution of that over time is quite interesting. And I wonder if you could comment on that.
Well, as I mentioned in the presentation as it relates to Winston Cluster, he worked very closely with his design team. In my opinion, Harry was a stones guy, right? We use that terminology, like, oh, he's a stone guy, he's not a jewelry guy. And so he very much relied on his designers to bring his creations to life. There were a few most notable designers that we've heard about and has been published through the years, but I think it was Harry's ability to find the right designer, both men and women, on his team that really helped evolutionize the design style of Winston. A lot of when people think Winston, they think big stones. They also think like, $1 million necklaces and that type of thing. But throughout the archives, there are pieces where it was clear that Harry Winston was paying attention to the market and trying new things and further evolving what the brand was trying to tell the world. And that's one of the things that I appreciate when I have taken a deep dive into the Harry Winston archives, that I can see, again, those little pockets of Harry Winston paying attention to what's happening in the industry and evolving the brand in that way. Anybody else?
Shirley?
Are any of the Winston descendants still involved with the company?
No.
Any other questions? Yes.
Say again, did he always set in platinum? Mostly. However, obviously in the 70s, there's some incredible yellow gold collections that came out of Harry Winston, but a lot of the earlier items, definitely platinum. The core of their business and his business was platinum, but there's a lot of yellow gold in the mix from the late 60s on, and definitely today the brand continues to experiment with not just yellow gold, but rose gold.
Naive question. How good do you know about the state collections that are available or were available in 1940s? I understand nowadays with the internet, whatever, you would be able to have access to all this, but how would you know that one is discovered in South African mine, whatever, with that size, and now I'm gonna go purchase this before that, and, what sort of communication, what sort of, advertisement? I'm just curious, so.
You mean the brand does today?
No, I'm
Or
talking
the-
how did Harry knew about a diamond that is in South Africa or in Sri Lanka and the state collection that's for sale?
Sure.
And all that stuff?
He was very connected. It's really just that simple. He stayed connected. He, again, he was in contact with lawyers, the banks, and because this was also a man who was publicly donating items to the Smithsonian, Harry Winston was a very important name. He built his business in the 1920s, before the 20s, buying and selling estates. So it was mostly through reputation is kind of like the shortest, the simplest explanation is reputation.
Yes.
Did he have a gemological background?
He didn't. He was born an innate gemologist. He was, but no, he didn't have proper education. His father, who was a jeweler, thought that this little emerald that Harry bought was junk. He was literally going to just, take it to the hammer, and Harry begged him not to. And he was 12 years old. So Harry really did have that innate sense of gems. And there was a great quote from him once where he talked about how he never forgot a gemstone, how he would see a collection, and if for whatever reason he didn't get that estate that time, if he saw it years later, he would know instinctively and remember exactly what it was he saw on that estate.
Angela, for the 50th anniversary of the Hope Diamond being donated to the Smithsonian, one of the Harry Winston designers designed a new necklace for the Hope, and it was on display there at the Smithsonian.
It was the Embracing Hope, and there was a great marketing campaign that Harry Winston put out, and the American public voted on 3 different necklaces, and it was the Embracing Hope design. The designer was Maurice Galli. He'd worked with the company for many years. It was his design, and so the Hope Diamond was reset into that necklace for 1 year, and then it was unset and put back into its original setting. Yeah.
Yes.
As he had he had heirs, but as they didn't take over the business, what happened to Harry Winston's business after he died?
So it was actually his son one of his sons, Ronald Winston, did take over the brand for many years. And then I first started at Winston in 2006, and in my time there, the company changed hands 3 times. It's currently owned by the Swatch Group, but his son Ronald did take over the business for, I've forgotten how many years, after Harry died.
Shirley?
So, Edna, which I just recently learned from Ron Winston's book, because there's not a lot of information about Edna, nor would there be in the Harry Winston archives, but she spent the last 10 years of her life, unfortunately, bedridden and very sick in Florida. She was, as I understand it, she was sick before Harry died, but again, her last 10 years, she was very sick in Florida.
Is there a book about Harry?
So Harry Winston, the brand, they publish, they're not in print anymore, but you can buy them on like eBay. But there are 4 editions of Harry Winston, the Ultimate Jeweler. In 2012, Harry Winston, the company today, launched a brand book, and I'm not certain if it's out of print. It might be, because at this point it's been several years. But that is what the brand produced, and fingers crossed that they're working on something new. But Harry's been very well, published about, so there's plenty to offer out there.
One last question? We're good?
Very good.
Very
Thank you
good.
so much. Thank
Applause.
you.